We are talking about creating a book for a Christian audience, and I wanted to remind you of something. Most writers I know write from their struggle and not from their success. So if they are struggling in their prayer life, then they practice that. They try new things. Eventually they find some success, and then they want to share that. If they are facing a difficult situation, then they talk about, this is what I found hard, and here's how I grew through that. And it's funny, I just find that the most powerful manuscripts came out of struggle. As a matter of fact, I often find it hard to relate to somebody who comes in and they know everything. They've got all the answers, and it's like, well, I was never like that. I never had all the answers. I struggled. I struggled knowing how to be a dad. I struggled knowing how to be a husband. I struggled knowing how to save money. I struggled knowing, how to make friends, how to not be a jerk. And some of those things I got better at, usually by reading a good book. But I just want you to understand that the notion of a book is usually trying to understand something so that you're trying to answer a question because you're not the only person who asked it. Other people have asked that question. You're not the only people who has that problem. Other people have that problem and are looking for solutions. So you create this document, which you have outlined, exploded, done a brain dump on, then evaluated in terms of, does it speak to the audience? Does it answer the question they have? Does it offer solutions to the problem? Nobody really buys a book which just asks questions. I really believe that. The notion of, think of it this way. If you are overweight, you want a book which offers some solutions to how to lose weight. You really don't want to buy a book by somebody who's like, man, I really struggle with that. Never figured out what to do, but I still struggle. Come on. We're buying a nonfiction book specifically to find some solutions. So when you put that together, then I'm going to tell you what you need. You need an editor. And by editor, I mean you need somebody that is not your mom, somebody who's not in love with you, but somebody who can take a clear-eyed look at your manuscript and offer some guidance in terms to how to make it better. Now, I'm just going to tell you, that's going to be different for different people. The reason you don't go to your mom or to your spouse or something, and you can ask them to read it, but those people love you. And, every entertainer knows that the number one rule of success is get the audience to love you. If the audience loves you, if you're a comic and the audience loves you, anything you say they find hilarious. The fact is, you want to find somebody who doesn't love you. You want to find somebody who's neutral towards you, who can read your manuscript as an editor and say, this needs to be better. This needs to be better. This isn't clear. I have no idea what this story means. You said you're going to have 5 points here and there's 7 points. Or you said you were going to have 5 points here and there's 3 points. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a failure to have an editor look at your book and make changes. That's the process of creating a book. There's a reason why when you're doing a play, if you're part of a play in community theater or something like that, it's the reason you have rehearsals. If you are a musician and you're playing a violin in the community symphony, there's a reason you have rehearsals. It's because you're trying to get it right. You're trying to go through and get it right, to refine it. That's what an editor does. Now, you may have money to be able to simply go to an editorial freelance, and you can just Google the Editorial Freelancers Association, and they'll introduce you to somebody who edits the kind of book you have, and they'll even tell you what the pricing is. Or you can ask around, talk to people in the industry or something, and they might be able to introduce you to an editor. But oftentimes when we're first starting in the business, we simply find another writer. And they're a writer, they're writing something, you are writing something, and so you swap. If you'll read mine and tell me what you think, I'll read yours, but you have to be honest. And one of the things is, as a writer, you are going to face failure. Now, I know that people who are dancers and musicians, they understand this immediately, because they're playing, something's not right, the notes are not right, and the other musicians will say, well, play it this way. This is how it's supposed to be. And that's just correction and refinement and improvement. But for some reason, when we're writing, we feel as though, oh, I'm wounded. They told me this wasn't perfect. Nothing's perfect on the first try. So you're going to find an editor, somebody who's going to take it, they're going to improve it, they're going to try and change it, and then you're going to get it back, and you're going to listen to what they have to say. Now, as a guy who spent his life in publishing, I will tell you, editors aren't always right. They're not. Editing is an art, it's not a science. There's no correct way of always editing every sentence. Sometimes it's word choice, sometimes it's grammar, sometimes it's punctuation, sometimes it's the structure of the argument, and sometimes the editor just missed the point. That's okay. Still, you're better off listening to editors. I would say that I told the writers I worked with, 90% of the time the editor's correct, because they are. That's okay. So you're changing it, you're improving it. I have on many occasions had writers come to me with a manuscript. They wanted me to read it, they wanted me to help them get it published, but they did not want any editing. I've even had authors tell me, well, God gave me this message, and so it needs to be just like this. And I'm like, well, it's surprising to hear that God is a bad speller, because the spelling here is atrocious. And so the fact is, you have to be able to take some criticism if you're going to write something for publication. So I said there were going to be two things here. One is to find an editor. Once you do that, you may go back and forth. You may have an editor look at it, you refine it, then you send it back again to the same editor or to somebody else, and you may go back and forth. It might surprise you to know that some of the best manuscripts I've ever worked on, some of the best manuscripts I've had the pleasure of being able to work on, we went back and forth 12, 14, 15 times on it to get it right. So it wasn't something they looked at once. The other thing is, sometimes the writer had to sit on it, because oftentimes a writer who's working on a manuscript, you're thinking of, they're digging into their well, and boy, the water's there, they're throwing things out and everything. And then the well goes dry, and they have to sit and think on it. The editor works on it, sends it back, and they sit and think on it while life goes on and the well refills, and then they come back to it. And suddenly then they have new insights or new things to say about it. So I said there were going to be two parts. The first part is the editor. The second part is the publisher. Once you have something that you think is ready to go, then you're going to figure out how to get it to a publisher, which is what we're going to talk about in the next session.